Good evening. Welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I'm Vishnu Shom. On the program tonight, there is no law that prohibits the use of headscarves in educational institutions, is what lawyers representing students who insist on wearing the hijab to educational institutes today argued before the Karnataka High Court. Now, these hearings are continuing. The key argument being made is that the hijab is mandatory as per the Quran and that there is no authority in India that can say no to its use unless there is a law and order issue. Today, though, there were several unfortunate scenes in the districts of Karnataka which have seen the hijab row. There were, for example, students who chose not to attend school if they weren't allowed to wear the hijab. Elsewhere, there were videos of women having to remove their hijab under public glare before being allowed to enter schools and colleges. Some of them would have felt offended at having to do this. Then there was also a video of a little girl torn between what her father wanted for her to keep wearing her hijab and what her teachers actually told her to do. That look, rules are rules. You need to get rid of the hijab to enter the school. Now, these are all perspectives in what appears to have become an extremely difficult debate. Tonight, again, in order to look at this issue, left, right and centre, all the various issues, we are looking at it from a perspective which perhaps we've not looked at closely enough. Since education is fundamental, shouldn't everybody prioritize that and attend school even as we wait for the outcome of the court judgment? That's our first debate, but later on the program, the astounding story of how the ex-CEO of the National Stock Exchange, which has a market capitalization of nearly $4 trillion, allegedly let a faceless yogi make key, seemingly ludicrous decisions as per an official report which has come out by SEBI. But we are going to start out with the big debate this evening, and we are looking at whether there is no law that prohibits the use of headscarves in educational institutions. That's what students barred from using the hijab have contended in the Karnataka High Court today. Joining us now, Meena Kandaswamy. We're also joined by Kazima Rizvi, Geeta Bhatt and Ashwini Dubey. They all join us. Thanks very much for being with us. Let me go across to Meena Kandaswamy. Thanks very much for being with us. Just a quick question. Is it time for us to perhaps go beyond the debate on the legality of wearing the hijab to also look very carefully at what many say it represents? A sense that it is regressive in many ways and that it takes away a little bit from the identity of the person wearing it in the manner in which we would like that person to actually be. How does one balance this all out?
Thank you for asking me this question, Vishnu, and for having me on your show. So to answer this question, as a Hindu woman, let me speak about let's see the bottu or the bindi that Hindu women wear. Right from Periyar, a lot of people say that it's very regressive. It's a symbol of oppression also because widows are not allowed to wear them. But can we argue on the basis that it's regressive that tomorrow in no educational institution in the country, Hindu girls will not be allowed to wear the bottu, the bindi? So this is just like I'm creating an equivalence here between, let's say, the hijab and the red dot on the forehead. Because if you go on the history of the red dot on the forehead, it means this is somebody who's consummated a relationship. It means somebody who's a married woman. It means somebody who's an auspicious woman. So these are like religious symbols can mean anything. The question is also when we look at the issue of the hijab and the opposition coming from the Hindu right wing, we also have to understand that just 100 years ago, lower caste women were not allowed to cover their breast. They were not allowed to wear blouses. This led to riots in part of Tamil Nadu, in part of Kerala. And the women had to wage a struggle just to cover themselves. So we can ask, what is the social mores of the time? We can question, what about, it's very liberated not to sometimes wear a blouse, But the question is, do you want liberty or do you want your choice of actually wearing a blouse? So I think I don't think we should conflate this issue because, as you rightly pointed out at the beginning of your show, the most important question is, should the girls have access to education? So should they be allowed to, read?
No, I think you raised some very important issues and thanks for raising
education
them.
Because
and I'll come back to the education point, but I wanted Geeta ji to actually reply to that because I think, Meena makes an important point where she does make an equivalence between the bindi and the hijab, and she says that both of these in certain interpretations can be considered regressive, and yet these are both valued by people of different faiths. How do we reconcile this entire argument that what works for people of one faith may not necessarily be seen the same way as others, and therefore we should accept all? We should accept the bindi in as much as we accept the hijab.
Well, Vishnuji, thanks for having me on your show. But first of all, I would like to say that, I went to the school in the 20th century. And I remember very categorically that no one was allowed any bindi, any rings, bangles, anything, to wear. And even if you had to tie your hair, the rubber band had to be the same color as that which was prescribed in the, in the uniform. So, I would like to.
I also went to school in the 20th century.
I think you made your submission. Have the patience at least to the.
No, that is a false representation. I wore a bindi every day. No, my father.
Tolerance on your show, Vishnuji. Yeah, at least in your.
One sec, Meena, half a second. I'll let you reply. Let Geeta ji make her point.
Yeah. Your time, ma'am. Please let others also speak.
Geeta ji, go ahead.
Now, yes. So the point here is that you see, here the question is that whether it is the autonomy of an institution which will be given a priority over an individual's rights. Now, no one is talking.
No, but Geeta ji,
there are many unmarried women who
I'm not asking you that question.
I know who put a bindi.
I'm not asking you that question, and we'll perhaps get to that in this debate. But why don't you reply to what Meena says? If we talk about the hijab being potentially regressive, then should we not also look at what people of other religions wear, which may also be considered regressive and yet are accepted much more than, say, the hijab?
You see, no one is, I am no one to, I may have my personal
Let me give another example. Let me give you another example. What about the
Muslim woman, whether she wants to.
Meena, half a second. Meena, we try and get all views. I promise I'll come back to you. Let Geeta ji finish a point and then I'll come to you next. Yes.
You see, Vishnuji, as an individual, I may have my own personal opinion about whether the hijab is regressive or not.
Yes.
But the point here is not that. The point here is that if a Muslim woman wants to cover her face, she is free to do that. But it is very surprising to see that when Aruza Parvez from Jammu Kashmir, who was the topper of class 12, who got 499 out of 500 marks, when she decides that I don't want to cover my face, the fundamentalists are running after her, and where are all the, women rights activists who are there to protect her rights?
All right, one sec. That's one example that you've raised.
Just give me 10 more seconds. I want to put forth that the arguments that are taking place in the court, it just shows what the submission has been made by the lawyer, that there are, and this is on behalf of these girls, these school-going girls. Look at their, how politically savvy they are. They're telling that.
No, but I think the arguments that they've raised are important arguments. But Geeta ji, one second. Let Meena reply to that. You've made lots of points. One second, Geeta ji, 1 minute, Geeta ji. We'll get to what's said in court next. But Meena, you have a point to make.
I have a small interpretation here. Let us even forget the question of the. I went to a Kendriya Vidyalaya. My father was an ex-RSS pracharak. I was not allowed to do anything without wearing a bindi. Only now, as an autonomous woman, I'm not wearing the bindi. So it is a question of the school. Of course, it allows the bindi. But the question for me again is, when you talk about regressive, let's talk about the sacred thread. The janu or the punul is only something a Dwij, a Brahmin, a twice-born man can wear, and they wear that. And when they that, it means they are intellectually superior. It says they are twice born. It says the others are lower caste. Are we going to start policing what men are wearing inside their clothes? Because that's also, sometimes they dangle their punul in front of everybody.
Meena, you mentioned the Kendriya Vidyalaya. Isn't it strange that in a Kendriya Vidyalaya, as part of the rules, apparently you can wear a hijab and it's not an issue in Kendriya Vidyalayas? So it's rather strange what one can and what one can wear in some institutions and what one cannot wear in others. I'll come back to you, Geeta ji, in a little while from now, but I just wanted to go across to Kazima as well. Kazima, the central argument being raised over here is, can a college development committee consisting of MLAs and subordinates decide if this exercise of right is permissible? In other words, there's Article 25 that protects religious freedoms in the country, and that there is no body which can actually decide a dress code. So where does this actually end? Do you believe that dress codes essentially in our system need to be removed at all levels? Because there are people wearing turbans, for example. There are people's wearing, Christians wearing a cross. There are Muslims wearing a hijab. So where does this all go to? Where does this all end?
First of all, thank you so much for inviting me. And second of all, look, there is, if I wear a hijab doesn't mean that I'm not following a dress code. I'm not wearing, I'm violating the dress code of the particular institution or university. If I'm wearing a hijab, it's because this is something that is my fundamental right. Mm-hmm. I'm wearing it because it is my identity. And somehow, I'm not just asking, I'm not just, in excluding the dress code. I'm not asking to exclude the dress code from the institution. I'm asking to add the hijab in it because, wearing hijab doesn't mean that you're not following the protocol of the university, that you're not following that you don't have a right to, you can't wear a uniform. Because look, there as Sikh students who wear turban, I went to school. There was never been an issue that raised by my Hindu friends or raised by my teachers that why are you wearing a headscarf? What is this concern? Never ever I asked my fellow classmates that why are you wearing a turban? Why are you wearing a tilak? So it was never such issue. But now that issue, if that issue raised, then I'm just telling that my hijab is I'm not excluding the uniform and I'm not excluding the uniformity of the institution. I'm just adding on something that is my faith. And that is the most disgusting way to choose between your faith and education, because they both have different, somehow they both are important to me. My education is as important as my hijab.
As your faith. All right. No, that's an important point. And some would, Kazima perhaps disagree with that. I just wanted to go across to Ashwini Dubey. Again, this is an angle that we need to pursue more about. The primary goal, and I'm sure we all agree, is education in our country. Beti Padhao is one of the most laudable missions in our country. In a situation like that, wasn't it sad in a way that those 12 to 15 girls who went to school chose to come away because they refused to take off the hijab even when a court hearing is taking place? Shouldn't education be the final decider of everything?
Thank you, Vishnuji, for having me here. Vishnuji, correct me if I am wrong, but allow me to complete in 50 seconds. Point number one. There are clashes between the state mandated law and my right to wear what I want.
Right.
When there is a Karnataka Education Act 1983. 133 of the Karnataka Education Act says that in the government-run schools, the religious attire will not be permitted. My point number one. Point number two, essential religious test has been decided by Honorable Supreme Court in Rati Lal P. Gandhi versus State of Bombay in 1954. The Supreme Court says that Article 25 of the Constitution of India gives us autonomy to propagate, to follow my religion of our own choice. But 25A makes some radar. Radar you have discussed at length, Vishnuji, you are very learned journalist. Point number three. Here the uniformity and common dress code is prime motive of an education system. The integrity towards the nation, allegiance towards the constitution, uniformity and inclusion in diversity. This is the prime motive of education. Very well you have said the right to education is in place. Right to Education Act passed by the parliament says that everyone has a right to get education. But the question here is, the fundamental question here is, Vishnuji, that whether when there is a law in place, law says that I have to wear this. Let me correct it. This dispute is not between the headscarf versus uniform. This dispute is between the religious attire, which is hijab, versus uniform.
No,
so
but Ashwini ji, if you're quoting, the law, then let me also quote the law, and let's go back a couple of years to what the Kerala High Court said, and this is what came up in court today, where it was mentioned that the Kerala High Court, in a particular case, the AIP MT case, said that even if there are different points of view, the right should be protected of wearing a headscarf if it has a foundation of faith and does not infringe on anybody else's freedom. And the arguments which were constantly raised is that if this doesn't result in a law and order issue, if somebody wearing a hijab doesn't interfere with what someone else is wearing, then why should it be stopped?
Very, very respectfully, Vishnuji, another 30 seconds. There are three judgments, three different aspects taqwa, the hijab, was the religious attire versus the constitutional public order and law in place. The Kerala High Court, you have very rightly quoted at 3 times. One, allowed the wearing of hijab to the students of All India pre-medical test, but did not quash the CBSE notification. Point 1. In 2018, the single bench of Honorable, the said High Court, said that, look, institutional rights shall prevail over the individual rights. That's the 2018. That is being extensively argued. My point here is not that whether I do not have right or right to wear or not.
But again, Ashwini ji,
small point here. We have
half a second, ma'am. Ashwini ji, if you're quoting that, and Meena, I'll come to you next, then let me also counter quote Madras High Court judgment in the Muhammad Ajmal Khan versus Election Commission case, and I quote, "It is thus seen from the reported material that there is almost unanimity among Muslim scholars that parda is not essential, but covering of head by scarf is an obligation, is obligatory." So, I mean, it's. I'm sure what you're quoting is right, but this is also what I'm quoting.
Very, very respectfully, Vishnuji, another 30 seconds. Very rightly, you have well researched on the topic. The Kerala High Court also said that, look,
this is Madras High Court. This is another one.
The Madras High Court, the Election Commission notification was not quashed. The Election Commission says that, look, the High Court says that since the photograph is the essential thing to be identified to a voter, and we will not quash it. You have a right to wear your religious attire. And very respectfully, another Vishnuji, in Ismail Faruqi versus Union of India, the Supreme Court 95 judges bench of 1995, which was extensively referred in Ram Janmabhoomi case.
Okay, Ashwini ji, I'm running short on time. Sorry to interrupt you. Meena, last point to you. Go ahead.
My last point is that just because a law exists doesn't mean that that is the last word on anything. At some point in this country, child marriage was illegal. In some point in this country, in parts of the world, apartheid was legal under the legal system. So if the law doesn't allow this to happen, then we have to change the law. The law has to be democratic. The law has to respect the constitution. The law has to uphold individual liberty of clothes. It has to uphold the women's rights over clothes. It also has to uphold the religious right of Muslim women to wear the headscarf, because it's a matter tied up to also their faith as much as an issue of right. So I think the law has to be the thing addressed here. We've had many regressive laws, and most of these regressive laws have been thrown out. So this is perhaps the time to discuss the law.
All right. It certainly is, and that's what's happening in the court as well. Let's just quickly move on now to our next debate, and thank you all very much for being with us. The next topic that we're actually looking at is something that concerns what is actually taking place in the National Stock Exchange. And the key issue that is actually something that has arisen is how the NSC's Chief Executive Officer in the past, Chitra Ramakrishnan, had actually, according to a report which has come out, made a faceless con man, Yogi, make key decisions. Let's go to the top of the rundown for a moment, because I want to just read out a couple of important details on this before I go across to my guests. A few more details of what exactly it is that we are looking at over here. This is our second debate this evening. Now, the astounding story that is of how the ex-CEO of the National Stock Exchange, which has a market capitalization of nearly $4 trillion, allegedly let a faceless Yogi make key, seemingly ludicrous decisions as per an official SEBI report. Joining us now, Subhash Chandra Garg, the former Finance Secretary in the Ministry of Finance, Madhavan Narayanan, the senior journalist, and Dhirendra Kumar, founder and CEO of Value Research. I'd like to thank you all very much for being with us. Mr. Kumar, let me come to you first. The market capitalization of the National Stock Exchange is $4 trillion almost, and yet apparently this faceless Yogi residing in the Himalayas was responsible for the appointment of a key official. What does this say about the functioning of the National Stock Exchange? Did it not have a system of checks and balances?
No, clearly, actually, just to correct that, NSE is still not a public company. It has no market capitalization. It is yet to go public. But more importantly, it is among the largest, stock exchange in the world, and among the largest, and supporting, and it's a very critical market infrastructure. So in that sense, this is something which is extremely, unprofessional, and it is gross mismanagement. It is really funny that And this has come out in the 200-page report, the order which has come out from SEBI a day before. And the whole, we all have been aware of all these things. We became aware of these things last year when Sucheta and Debashish Basu came out with their book, Absolute Power. And there is a full chapter giving the narration of all the sequence of events and their actions and behavior. And this particular order which has come out, it's really quite alarming. That if we don't have checks and balances, this is a critical market infrastructure. The National Stock Exchange is just not another company. It is a company which is very critical to our market, and that is why it is regulated in a very different way as compared to any other corporation.
In fact, a lot of this has to do with the appointment of Mr. Anand Subramanian, according to the report. He was actually known very little in the industry. He was appointed as the exchange's chief operating officer in 2013. That appointment apparently cost the NSE 5 crore rupees. When he did join, he was earning a fraction. He was earning 15 lakh rupees a year. By the time it went up in a couple of years, he was at the salary level of 5 crore a year, and apparently his appointment was done on the basis of this mysterious email exchange between the CEO of the NSE and some guru who was replying back on email. Mr. Garg, your thoughts on this? I mean, it's astounding. It belongs on Netflix. It doesn't belong, in the real world.
So the SEBI report uncovers the yogi and makes it very clear that this guy, Anand Subramanian, was actually the guy, yogi also. So it is nothing short of fraud done in a mysterious manner. This woman, Chitra Ramakrishna, was in a way emotionally and psychologically overpowered by this person who then was appointed exclusively by her, not by the board, not by the system, following the system. So it's a plain and simple story, but very unfortunate and sickening in a way, where the CEO of a big exchange like NSE had virtually become a servant, a kind of gulam of this person.
Right. Madhava Narayanan, what sort of damage was done to the NSE over these years?
Oh, well, Vishnu, I think I kind of agree with both Dhirendra Kumar and Mr. Garg, but I'm afraid there is more to this because NSE is an institution under the supervision of the Securities and Exchange Board of India, and therefore you'll have to look at it as an institutional problem and not just the monopoly of one woman who might have been mesmerized, or if you don't take things at face value, politically influenced. So we'll have to look at who actually was supposed to supervise her. Was it the finance ministry? Was it the SEBI? Was it fellow officials who might have turned whistleblowers and apparently seem to have turned whistleblowers? Let me also point out to the fact that Ms. Ramakrishna was at the helm of NSE when another major scandal took place, which is called the co-location scam, which is about NSE allowing special privilege to electronic access through the premises in a world where within seconds hundreds of millions of dollars can be won or lost, therefore creating an uneven playing field. You also have to look at the fact that the Bombay Stock Exchange, now known as BSE, and now defunct MCX SX, had explicitly complained to the SEBI about the co-location, bias that the NSE practiced.
Right.
Now, NSE has a dubious character. Logically speaking, let's draw a parallel between SEBI supervision and the RBI supervision and the Insurance Authority supervision.
Right.
Insurance Development Authority, IRDA, has a declared LIC, New India Assurance and General Re to be systemically important insurance companies.
Right.
Similarly, State Bank of India, ICICI Bank and HDFC Bank have been declared systemically important.
And in this case?
in this case, NSE was but was never treated as such.
Right.
There was oversight, no supervision. A free hand was given, which is why the book titled Absolute Power is perfectly fit for this NSE.
All right.
And one woman who either she was mesmerized or psychologically compromised or maybe politically influenced, who knows? This is
right. Well, one way or the other, it's just a shocking account, and at least there is transparency in the report.
About Netflix. I've got different story ideas
right.
for Netflix.
All right, look, gentlemen, I'm running out of time. I'd like to leave it over here, but there's so much more to be discussed on what exactly happened per that report. Comments coming in on coup. Samir Thakur says, what action was taken against the NSE CEO for exchanging official mails with an unknown man? In fact, there was a lot of action which was taken, and she was taken out of her role. Devraj says, how is it even possible? Well, evidently it did take place, according to this SEBI report, and everything in this is attributed to that SEBI report, which has been published and publicly available. Out of time on Left, Right and Centre. We'll take a break. More coming up.